Okay. I want to talk to you for just a minute on the bottom of page 15 about political spectrums. Because today, we're being thrust onto the spectrum of the what and the what. You know this? The left and the right. That's your left, your right. Say that. That's your left, your. What do you normally think of as being way over on the far left? As far as you can go, way over. What would be there? Some kind of brutal, tyrannical government, right? Communism is the worst kind you know of. Communism on the left, and then once in a while you hear or you read in the press, that guy is so far right he's a fascist. And that's kind of the spectrum that we're presented. Okay, if that's the spectrum, I like to ask people, okay, because the spectrum is supposed to include everything, right? One extreme to the other, okay? If that's the spectrum, where are you? Where are you on this spectrum? You in the middle? You a moderate? Call me a moderate. What's a moderate? Wondering which way the political winds are blowing today? There's a fellow running years ago in Arizona. He used to go around the state saying, I'm a little right of center. Right of center. I was tempted to go up to him one day and say, you mean you're a little closer to fascism than communism? That would be nice. I didn't do that. See, this is very confusing. The founders had a much better way to measure government. They said if you measure government, you measure it like you measure anything else. It's on page 16. And on one end is zero government, no law. What is that? Anarchy. Anarchy. It's zero. And on the other end of the spectrum is 100% of whatever you're measuring, in this case government. What would that be? Tyranny. Tyranny. You want to hear Washington say that? On page 16, number 3, here at the top. He talks about from the extreme of anarchy to the extreme of tyranny. Those are his words. And all of a sudden you see that the founders had a different spectrum than we have today. It wasn't built on political parties, because those are always changing. It was built on 0 to 100%. And as you study the history of nations, you can put every nation on that spectrum depending on how much authority it exerts over the people. Right? Where does the government exist? Put them on that spectrum. And what the founders were trying to do, because as they studied history, they realized you got tyranny, people get tired of a tyrant, they throw them off, and the pendulum goes this way. They started, all of a sudden they realized, this is too close to anarchy, we can't have that, we've got to have a ruler, so they let another ruler come. It goes like this. This is the way it's been going for thousands of years. And do you know what they said? Well, let's read what Jefferson said, number 4. We're now vibrating between too much and too little government, and the pendulum will rest finally in the middle. What's the wish of Jefferson and the founders? To find the place on the spectrum where you have just enough government to protect the people, but not too much to oppress the people. And that's what he called the middle. We've given it a little more descriptive name. We like to call it the balance center. Balance between too little and too much. Balance. And once you find that, they said, you nail it down. Remember, writing? You nail it down. You put it in writing. You put chains around it, as was quoted here this morning. Chains of the Constitution, so it won't move. That was the desire, the wish, the objective of the founders. Find that balance. And they missed it the first time, as we'll discover in a little bit. So, I hope, especially our young people here, I hope you understand the Constitution is in the balance center of the spectrum. Now, today's Saturday. Maybe tomorrow at church or sometime next week, somebody just might ask you this question. Did you see that great game on Saturday? I guess there's a good game today, isn't it? Usually is. Somebody's playing something. No, I didn't. No, you didn't. Oh, you really missed a great game. Where were you? Well, I was over at the Hughes Brothers all day. Yeah, I mean, they're really good, you know. And what were you doing over there all day? Well, we were in school. We were in a class all day on Saturday. What was interesting? say, well, what was so interesting all day long? What were you studying? We were studying. We were studying. We were studying the Constitution. The Constitution. What are you? One of those right-wing wackos? And they just say that to you. Maybe they have already. I want you to stand up and say, no, I'm not a right wing or a left wing or any other wing. I'm right in the balanced center, right with the founding fathers. Of course, they'll have no idea what you're talking about. But there's a teaching moment for you. Always got to be teaching, right? In the balanced center. You young people especially. They will try to tell you, if you identify with the founders' thinking, you're off on some tangent somewhere, won't they? You're out of sync. You need to be more modern. No, you're balanced between too little and too much. Isn't that great? That's the Constitution. Now, in the time remaining, I just want to point out for your further study, I'll mention a few things here because we need to know, especially our young people need to know, when elements of ruler's law creep into our system. So on the bottom of page 16, you'll see our spectrum there, ruler's law and tyranny and anarchy, with a pyramid of ruler's law. What's the matter with that pyramid? It's upside down. Where's all the power? Number 2, all the power is concentrated in the ruler. Where are you? Here at the bottom. What's on your head? The point of the pyramid. Does it hurt? Oh yeah. We could even name some dates when it hurts more than others, right? Yeah, it hurts. It hurts. Number 3, the people are treated as subjects. Subjects of the ruler. These are all my subjects, you know. Subjects. And the land. This is all my realm. See, you can hear a ruler? This is all my realm. Boy, this was pointed out powerfully when President Clinton years ago came to Arizona, stood on the rim of the Grand Canyon, and signed an executive order bottling up nearly 2 million acres in southern Utah as a national monument. You know what that does? It just seals that huge area up. No exploration, no enjoyment, can't even hardly take a motorized vehicle into it. It's incredible. It's almost like you're saying, this is all my realm, you know. All my realm. Well, that's the way these people think. If you know the education of Bill Clinton and a few others we could mention, this is the way they've been taught. That there are a few very wise people to govern the stupid masses. And the stupid masses may not understand quite what they need. And you may even have to do it with a little force. But if they eventually come around, they'll understand it was necessary. That's the hope of the thing. If they never come around, well, that's the tragedy. Hence Carroll Quigley's book on this subject, Tragedy and Hope. Carroll Quigley was Bill Clinton's mentor at his college. Anyway, this is a ruler. Well, I want you to go to the bottom of page 17. We'll skip a little bit there. That's for your homework assignment. Letter C, Jefferson and the other founders were trying to find a better way. And one of the systems that they studied was ancient Israel. Let's turn over to page 18. Do you remember when Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt? And he gets them all out there. We know there was at least 2 million of them. We know there's 600,000 families from the book of Numbers, so there must be 2 million at least, right? And Moses gets them out there. This is in the 18th chapter of Exodus, by the way. And he says, you got any problems? Come and see me. Yeah, right. And so the record says the people lined up from morn till evening. And you can just imagine. What was Moses in charge of? Look at the diagram, top of page 18. He was in charge of what? Everything. Little problem, big problem, let's go see Moses. Probably didn't get any lunch, probably didn't get any dinner, probably didn't get much sleep, wakes up the next morning, line was longer than it was the day before. And there was a wise man standing over on the sideline, you know this story. What was his name? Jethro, his father-in-law, he said, this is in the 18th chapter, it says, Moses, that which thou doest is not good. He says, if you keep this up, you're going to waste away yourself and this people with you. And it doesn't say this, but you can almost hear Moses saying, well, Dad, do you have any suggestions? Yes, my son, I do. So, of course, with the help of God, Moses reorganizes the whole camp of Israel into what you see on the bottom of page 18. And Moses said, or Jethro said, okay, you take these 600,000 families, you divide them up into groups of 10 families, and each 10 family group will elect a leader. Well, how many 10 family groups can you get out of 600,000 families? 60,000. So now you got 60,000 leaders. Then you combine 5 of those 10 family groups, making 50 family groups, and each of them elect a leader. You got 12,000 more leaders. You're up to 72,000. Keep track. Then you take 2 of those 50 family groups, making 100 family groups. Each of them elect a leader. You got 6,000 more. You're up to 78,000. Then you take 10 of those 100 family groups, making 1,000 family groups. Each of them elect a leader. You've got 78,600, don't forget Moses, and 1 leaders. And then Moses said, now, you solve the problem at the local most level, and only the hard cases you bring to me. The record doesn't say this, but you can almost hear Moses go, let's go have lunch or something. This is an incredible story that the founders learned from the Old Testament. How to organize people in an efficient, representative way. Ancient Israel. It's what caused Jefferson to write this famous quote. What we need to do in our land, he said, is to take the large republic and to break it up into smaller and smaller republics, assigning to each level that which it can do the best. Most government will be, when you think about it, after you do it, what it can do the best at local levels. Hence, pyramid, right? Most government. Brilliant. This is all the founders. And on the top of the next page, letter G, just a few things about what they learned from ancient Israel. Number 1, they were set up as a commonwealth of freemen. What does that mean? Commonwealth of freemen. That means everyone is equal. There's no person above anybody else. We all have the same rights. That's what a commonwealth of freemen means, right? And once Moses established this law and it became effective, God gave him a command and said, proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. And the founders love that scripture in Leviticus 25:10. Where do they put it in Americana? Who knows this? Right around the top of the Liberty Bell. Every time that bell bonged, it was symbolically proclaiming liberty throughout all the land. Isn't that wonderful? We take our students to Philadelphia every 2 years, and we go right in front of Independence Hall, you may know, is the structure that houses the Liberty Bell. And I tell them, now you be sure to go in there and read on the top of the Liberty Bell that scripture on federal property. Anyway, you don't even have. Every state has a copy of the Liberty, has a replica of the Liberty Bell. I'm sure you can go there and read scripture on state property. Look at number 2. The people were, duties and responsibilities of the people were based on religious principles and a solid commitment to morality. They knew, as principle number 2 says on your card, that a free people cannot survive under a republican constitution unless they remain virtuous and morally strong. This is the whole foundation. You must have that as a foundation. And Washington said in his farewell address, don't forget, morality and religion are indispensable supports to our republic. What would an indispensable support be of this building? Steel beams, walls, things that keep the roof up. You take those out, it's going to crash. And here Washington is saying morality and religion are indispensable support. But he doesn't stop there. This is in his farewell address. He said, be careful of people who come to you and say, you can have morality without religion. Why would he say that? Why would he say that? You ever heard somebody say, I can be moral, I don't have to have religion to be moral. Okay, that's fine, but whose morality do you have? Mine. In other words, there's no standard. That's what religion does for moral thinking. It provides a standard. So Washington's saying, don't kid yourself. Isn't that amazing? But he doesn't stop there. He said, be careful of people who come to you with, these are his words, refined education. And say, you don't need religion. Do the founders have answers? Oh my. Incredible. This is all Washington. Well, let's read a couple more here. Number 2, letter A. Franklin said, only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. As nations become corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters. Do you feel the masters coming? Yes. What must you say with Franklin about our people generally? What must you say? We are becoming what? More corrupt and vicious. Look at the next one, letter B. John Adams said, this surprises some people, our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. It will not work. Here we're trying to solve these problems, the big problems we have in America today, and there's hardly any mention from the official level of morality and religion. And you could say with John Adams, you can try as much as you want, present all these programs, spend all this money, bail out everybody, and it will not work. And I make no apology. I operate a charter high school in Mesa. Charter school is one which is publicly funded but privately operated. The Arizona legislature has given some pretty wide latitude for charter schools. But even in regular public schools, you make no apology. Even the ACLU says you cannot teach American history properly without teaching the influence of religion. Well, we quote the founders, and we teach the influence of religion. And it's thrilling. I'm thrilled that one of my students is here today. She graduated in 2009 from our school, Ashley Tucker. She told me during the break. Well, I'm kind of fudging here. You didn't tell me this, but you almost said it. I almost wanted to come up and recite the 28 principles. She could do it, yeah. Anyway, number 3, this is ancient Israel. They were organized in small manageable units where everyone had a voice and a vote. You want to understand what the people think? Then you make sure they have an opportunity to express themselves periodically, every 2 years or so, at a polling place close to them. See, that's how you do that in a free country. Number 5, they had a system of honest money. Let's see if I've got any honest money. Well, I've got this. Is honest money? No, why isn't this honest money? It's not worth anything. Intrinsically. Founder said your money has to have intrinsic value, meaning value in and of itself. So when you trade it for something, it's value for value. The only value this has is what you and I continue to think it has. And based on politics and a few other things, right? Founder said, we'll see this afternoon, you make sure your money system has a basis of value, gold and silver. Why would a politician want to take back gold and silver backing off of money? Yeah. If a politician wants to distribute let's say FDR, $100 billion of new money to people out of his New Deal, he would have to put $100 million of gold into Fort Knox or wherever to back it up if it's new money. See, that's a limitation on a politician with regards to money. Well, you take that backing off, what can a politician do? Just start up those printing presses. Print up 100 billion and distribute it out. and say, remember me, remember what I did for you in the next election. Honest money. Did you know that that was a law in ancient Israel? Number 9, all leaders. Number 10, all laws came into consent only with the approval of the people. This is a great concept, folks. Not even God would thrust upon his people a leader they did not want. That's an interesting story. Remember, after the line of Judges, what did the people start clamoring for? King, king. So they went to the prophet Samuel and said, we want you to appoint us a king. Samuel goes to the Lord and said, they want a king. They've rejected me as their prophet. And the Lord said, remember this in the scripture? They haven't rejected you. They have rejected me. I'm their king, and they have rejected me. So he goes back and he tells the people what a king, an earthly king would do. He'll take all your money and take all your young men and build all these palaces and get this. That's a great speech in the Book of Kings. And the people say, we got to be like our neighbors. We got to be like our neighbors. We want a king. So God told Saul, okay, you go choose the best one we can find. He chose who? You know this. Saul. Tall, young, good looking. Oh, this is a king. What happened to Saul? Same thing that happens to almost everybody as soon as they get a little authority, right? Anyway, so not even God would thrust upon his people someone they don't want. Even himself as their king. And by the way, our founders also said, we already have a king. We don't need another king. And that king is Jesus Christ. Number 11, accused persons were presumed to be innocent until proven guilty. You get a king of Europe, he says, arrest that man, put him in jail. Yeah, but your majesty, he wants a trial. Well, give him a trial, give him a trial. Yeah, but we don't have enough evidence to convict him. You know what the king used to do? He used to go to Parliament and say, I want to build a attainder on that man. What's that? That's a legislative decree saying he's guilty. That's called a bill of attainder. The founder said, we'll have none of that in our system. They put in the Constitution, no bill of attainder. If you cannot prove a person guilty in a court of law under rules of evidence, even if you really think he's guilty, what do you have to do? Let him go. Knowing what? Knowing what? Not only that he's guilty, but when the final DVD is played, or however it's being recorded, you do believe all the secret acts of men are being recorded, yours, mine, all being recorded. And as the good book says, when it all comes out, we'll know whether he did it or not. You just have to leave it to the judgment of God. Isn't that beautiful? Answer blank, letter 11, God. Number 12, the entire code of justice was based primarily on reparation to the victim, rather than fines and punishment by the Commonwealth. Reparation to the victim. Right? What does that mean? Well, if you're arrested today, number of things can happen to you. You can either be what? And convicted, rather. You can be fined, you can be confined to jail, or your life can be taken, or a combination of those, right? Where does the fine usually go? Not always, but usually. You notice this? It goes to the government, to the state. And the criminal goes to jail. And who pays to keep the criminal in jail? The victims. Something's wrong with that system. See, in ancient Israel, you steal a sheep, what do you have to give back? 2 sheep, one to replace the one you stole, the other to make it hurt so you won't do it anymore. We call that punitive damages. And where do they go? To the victim. This is incredible. And the founders loved that system. Reparation to the victim. And here we're keeping all these people in jail. I don't know about your state, but in my state, it costs $25,000 a year to keep one person in jail. Well, unless you're in Sheriff Joe's jail. One of those 10 cities, a lot less than 25,000, I'll tell you what. Yeah, 115 degrees, but hey, like he says, you don't want to be in my jail, do you? Then don't come. He's good. He's good. I don't know, he's got some challenges now that interesting from other sources. I want you to, I'm just going to quickly here since we've only got about 8 minutes left. I should mention over on page 20, and well actually page 19, the bottom of 13, the main thrust of government was from the people upward. See, people's law is government from the people upward. Ruler's law is government from the ruler down. Got this concept? We'll talk about this afternoon. This is people's law. This is ruler's law. And so the founder said, this is people's law. But there is a time, and we're going to put it right in our Constitution, where you may have to have some of this. And this is during an emergency. This is known as the war powers of Congress. And that's your blank top, page 20. The war powers. And they said one of the 20 powers given to Congress is that Congress, in other words, the representatives of the people, if they see a situation that is so bad and so threatening, they, the representatives of the people who send their young people into battle, if they decide it's time to go to war, then Congress can declare war. Not the president, not any other body, only Congress. Do we have a problem with that? We got a big problem with that. And then, if Congress declares war, there are certain war powers that come into play. For example, the president may have the authority then to take over an industry. To build and manufacture certain war material. He may have to take over a highway. He may have to ration food. If it's a real emergency, you got to do whatever you can do to win. That's called the war powers. But when the emergency is over, all of those things that were done under the War Powers Act go back to the people. See, this is constitutional thinking. Do you know that there are agencies of government that exist today under different names that were created under the War Powers Act during World War I? I thought World War I was over. See, we haven't been true to the Constitution. And we had another world war, and more agencies, and more powers were given, and they did not go back to the people. Now we don't even declare war anymore. And more agencies are created. And more power is usurped from the people. And none of it goes back. This adds great meaning to Rahm Emanuel's statement, don't let a good emergency go to waste. That's what he's talking about. You create an emergency so that people will accept it more. That's what happens. But that's not the founder's formula. Not at all. Okay. I want you to, on page 20 through 21, I'll just mention this briefly, is the Anglo-Saxon civilization that Jefferson particularly was a great student of. Most of the founders were descendants of these people. And there was a great 3-volume work done in their day called The History of Anglo-Saxons by Sharon Turner. And it is still one of the best. And it provided some incredible insights into the government of these people, the Anglo-Saxons. And they were particularly excited, excuse me, that their government seemed to mirror the government of ancient Israel. Many of the same concepts were there. For example, if you look over on page 21, under letter E, number 1, they consider themselves a commonwealth of freemen. Remember what that is? All the people are equally free, have the same rights. Commonwealth of freemen. Hence the language of the Magna Carta of the Saxons. These are the inalienable rights of all freemen. Remember that language? And here's how they were organized. Letter A, under number 2, the head of 10 families was called a tithing man. Tithing man. It's not the guy that goes around collecting the tithe. but it was the 10th man, which is what tithing means, right, 10? Okay. Letter B, the head of 50 families, it's become a little obscure, but it may have been a villeman or head of the village. Letter C, the head of 100 families was called a 100 man. The 100 man. For example, the Taylors, my ancestors, are from the Shire of Kent, which is south and east of London. And you look, if you do family history research back in those days, and you have a map of the Shire of Kent, it's broken up into very little, what they call hundreds. Hundreds. What hundred did your family live in? These were units of about 100 families. See this? About 100. Letter D, the head of 1,000 families was called the elderman. I like this one. Later shortened to Earl. Earl. You've heard of us Earls? Okay. The territory occupied by 1,000 families was called a shire, and the administrative assistant to the Earl was called a shire reef. We pronounce it sheriff, right? Which, I might say, is the highest form, the highest level of law enforcement. The founder said, never let law enforcement, I mean, this is the guy whom you authorize to arrest, carry a gun, to use it, the force of law. Never let that rise above a very local level. And so the sheriff was the highest form of law enforcement. When J. Edgar Hoover was head of the FBI during the gangster era, politicians wanted him to form a national police force. He said, he flatly refused, I will not do that. You do that, you'll lose your republic. You do not want law enforcement gravitating into higher levels of government. And this is why your local police and your sheriffs are responsible for enforcing all law. Either local law, state law, or federal law. You don't have a national police force to enforce immigration law except at the border. Who's going to enforce it among the states? It's the local police. Hence, Arizona says, you local police, you can enforce federal law. All of a sudden, they get criticized. Anyway, this is a great study. In some of our materials are developed much more. I'll introduce some of it to you this afternoon. Anglo-Saxons and ancient Israel. These great civilizations, bastions of freedom in the history of the world. And Thomas Jefferson, in the Declaration of Independence, wants to restore these great concepts of these principles. When we come back from lunch, then, we're going to get into the Constitutional Convention a little bit. Then I'm going to take you through some of the most powerful articles and sections of the Constitution. It's very easy to do.